You've probably met someone like this. They laugh easily in company, answer questions with just the right amount of warmth, nod at the right moments, maybe even make the joke that pulls everyone back together when the room gets tense. But when they're home, when the door clicks shut behind them, something changes. The smile fades. The voice goes quiet. They stand in the middle of the room and don't quite know what to do with their hands. They might start washing dishes that are already clean, or sit down to read something they won't remember. The performance is over, and underneath it all is a weight they've been carrying alone, often regret. Tonight, we're sitting with that weight. Not to make it heavier, but to understand what it asks of us, and what old wisdom might offer when we're trying to heal from something we can't undo. Regret has a particular texture. It doesn't announce itself the way anger does. It doesn't flare and fade like disappointment. Regret settles. It sits in the chest like a stone that's been there so long you've started to think it's just part of you. Maybe it's something you said years ago that you can't take back. Maybe it's a decision you made that changed the shape of your life, and now you see the other path so clearly it hurts. Maybe it's something you didn't do, a conversation you avoided, a risk you refused, a person you let slip away because you were too afraid or too proud or too young to know better. And the hardest part is that no amount of wishing changes it. The past stays exactly where it is. So you learn to laugh in public. You learn to look fine. And when you come home, the regret is still waiting. Let me tell you about a colleague I used to see in the hallway. She taught literature, always had a kind word for students, always seemed present. We'd talk sometimes after meetings, nothing deep, just the ordinary exchanges that make a workplace feel less lonely. One evening, we ended up walking to the parking lot at the same time. It was late autumn, that hour when the light goes soft and a little sad. She stopped by her car and said something I wasn't expecting. She told me she'd made a choice 20 years earlier, left a relationship, moved across the country for a job, rebuilt her entire life. And for 20 years, she'd carried the question of whether she'd been wrong. Not whether the life she built was good, but whether the person she left had deserved that silence, that sudden absence. She said she functioned fine. She loved her work. She had friends. But every so often, in quiet moments, the regret would rise up like cold water, and she'd feel like she was 25 again, standing at that same crossroads, wishing she'd been braver or kinder or wiser. I didn't offer advice that night. I just listened. But later, I kept thinking about what she'd said, and about how many of us live with some version of that same weight. We carry old choices like bruises that never quite heal. And we assume that healing means erasing them, going back and making them right, or at least understanding why we did what we did. But that's not quite how it works. There's an old lesson about this, one that comes from a tradition that believed deeply in the difference between what we control and what we don't. The past, once it's past, is beyond our control. We can't rewrite it. We can't apologize our way out of it if the person is gone or unwilling to hear us. We can't undo the harm or reclaim the opportunity. That's the hard truth. But here's the steadier one. We still control what we do with the weight we carry now. Healing from regret isn't about feeling nothing. It's not about forgiving yourself in some grand ceremonial way or deciding the past doesn't matter. It's smaller than that, and more honest. It's about learning to set the weight down long enough to live the day in front of you. Not forever. Not all at once. Just for now. Because regret, left unexamined, becomes a kind of punishment we assign ourselves, and we keep serving the sentence long after any reasonable term has passed. The Stoics would say that clinging to what cannot be changed is a misuse of attention. It's pouring your energy into a door that's already closed while the open one beside you goes unnoticed. So let's make this smaller. Let's say you come home tonight, and the weight is there again. The memory rises, the old shame or sorrow, the familiar loop of what if. Instead of trying to fight it or bury it or laugh it away, just notice it. You might say to yourself, quietly, this is regret. It's here again. Not as a failure, but as a fact. And then, instead of asking why you feel this way or whether you deserve to feel better, ask a different question: what is the next kind action I can take? Not kind in some vague moral sense. Kind as in honest, as in aligned with the person you're trying to become. Maybe that means washing the dishes because a clean counter helps you sleep. Maybe it means writing one sentence in a journal. Maybe it means texting a friend not to confess, but just to say hello. The action doesn't erase the regret. But it interrupts the loop. It reminds you that you're not frozen in the past. You're still here, still capable of choice. One of the old teachers would say that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Regret works exactly this way. The event itself is over. What remains is the story we tell about it, the weight we assign to it, the verdict we pass on ourselves again and again. And we have more power over that story than we think. Not to rewrite history, but to stop requiring ourselves to live as though the trial is still happening. You don't need to be declared innocent. You don't need closure from someone else. You need to recognize that you've already changed. The person you are now is not the same person who made that choice. You've learned. You've grown careful in new ways. The regret itself is evidence of that. I'm not saying this is easy. I'm not saying you do it once and the weight disappears. Some regrets we carry for years, maybe a lifetime. But we can carry them differently. We can stop letting them decide whether we're allowed to rest, whether we're allowed to try again, whether we're allowed to be gentle with ourselves on an ordinary Tuesday night. There's a line of thinking that says healing doesn't mean you never feel the wound again. It means the wound no longer determines the shape of your life. You can feel regret and still make dinner. You can remember what you lost and still show up tomorrow. You can carry the past and still walk forward. Here's what I want you to hear tonight, the sentence I'd want you to take with you into sleep: regret is not a life sentence, it's a signal that you once cared deeply, and that care still lives in you. Let that be enough. Let it soften the edges of the story you've been telling. You don't have to be the villain of your own past. You were doing your best with what you knew. And if your best wasn't enough then, it might be now. Not to undo what happened, but to live more honestly from here. My colleague, the one in the parking lot, she didn't resolve her regret that night. I don't think she ever will, not completely. But she told me once, months later, that she'd started doing something small. Every year on the anniversary of that old choice, she'd write a letter. Not to send, just to write. An honest accounting of what she wished she'd said, what she'd learned, what she hoped for the person she'd left behind. And then she'd put it away. She said it didn't erase anything, but it gave her a place to put the weight down for a while. It let her say, I still care. I still carry this. And I'm still here, trying to live well. That's all healing is, really. Not forgetting. Not pretending. Just continuing. So tonight, if the regret is loud, let it be loud for a moment. Don't perform the smile. Don't rush to cover it. Just sit with it the way you'd sit with an old companion who's tired and sad. Acknowledge what you carry. And then, gently, ask yourself what one small, kind action you can take before you sleep. Maybe it's forgiving yourself for 5 minutes. Maybe it's deciding that tomorrow, you'll try one thing differently. Maybe it's just breathing slowly and letting your body rest, even if your mind isn't ready yet. That's enough. That's the practice. That's how we heal from what we can't undo, not by erasing the past, but by refusing to let it consume the present. Let the night hold you softly. Let the weight rest beside you, not on you. And when you wake, you'll still be here, still capable, still allowed to begin again. That's the quiet strength regret can teach us, if we let it. Not that we were perfect, but that we're still willing to care, still willing to try, still willing to be kind to the person we've become. Rest now. The past is done. Tomorrow is still yours.